Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Italy Travel Podcast. I'm Darcy Melton.
And I'm Nathaniel Malloy.
And today we are talking about some essential need-to-knows for your trip to Italy. This is kind of tourist tips, but we're just going to go through them pretty rapidly and not expound as we can. If you've listened to this podcast before, you know we can prattle on for a long time. So we're going to run through the essentials.
I think 50% of us are well acquainted with a sentence that never ends. That is me. I'm the 50%, and my sentences rarely have a period at the end of them. There's sort of semicolon and another couple commas and the ellipses. So, as demonstrated before your very eyes.
Amazing. And before we get into it, we want to thank everybody who has been following and leaving reviews. If you enjoy this podcast, you can follow and leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you listen to podcasts. And a big old thank you so much to Ariel and Austin, our Rigatoni tier members on Patreon. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can click the link in the description or go to patreon.com/the Italy Travel Podcast. If you have any questions, you can also contact us there in our chat or head on over to onlyabag.com where we have a contact box and lots of articles written by myself and Nathaniel about traveling in Italy.
And thank you again so much to everybody.
Thank you so much.
So let's jump into it. I think we're going to talk about it today and Friday, but
yes,
this is also in no particular order, right? We've kind of kept them in a loose
we've kind of
subheadings.
grouped some tips together, but this is not in any order of importance or anything like that.
Exactly. And I think we also wanted to mention these mainly because we're in July now and, tourism season is really kicking off. So we figured for anyone who is like 2 weeks out from your trip or anything like that, thinking, oh my God, what if I miss something? What if there's something I need to know? We figured this is basically all the important stuff that we think is the most important, even if it's really small. That's just sort of, kind of the need to know.
Exactly. Like sort of almost essential umbrella tips.
Exactly.
So shall we start with the flight?
Yes. That sounds great,
That
actually.
is usually the first thing you do on your trip is take the flight to the location. So don't book a flight with less than 2 hours of an international layover. I think that's particularly important. I mean, it's almost only important these days because of the EES.
Yes.
Would you say?
Before EES, I think it was a risky decision because of passport control. And that was always a toss-up. I know that, like, for instance, flying through Frankfurt was always a bit, and that was like Lufthansa would fly through Frankfurt. That was always a bit of a toss-up where 2 hours was just about, like, if you were lucky, you'd get through in time. But that is something I would recommend not booking an international layover with less than 2 hours. There's also certain airports. I know that online you can find everybody's different breakdown at different airports. Some people hate Charles de Gaulle. Some people hate Lisbon. Other people hate, I cannot remember, but it's Schiphol. I think it's Amsterdam's airport.
Oh, okay.
Schiphol, Schipol. But it's like, I think those are big. I know that Charles de Gaulle and Amsterdam are both Delta's sort of hubs in Europe, KLM and Air France, respectively. So this is just simply to say, now especially though with EES, having an international layover can be the point where everything goes wrong. And if it's the first point of your trip, it is a terrible time for things to go wrong.
And a sort of sub-tip there, this doesn't happen in every airport, but some better organized airports will have, once you get to the passport check, they'll have a line that is, oh my gosh, my flight is very soon. Put me in this line, and then the regular line. I had that happen to me last time I flew, and I was on the cusp of it being, oh my gosh, I'm about to miss my flight line.
Yes.
So what I did was they had a sign that showed if your flight is leaving within this amount of time, or if you're on these listed flights, hop into the left-hand line. I had to go to the right and then weave my way back and get into the other line. So that's all to say, it might be stressful, but some airports do have the, oh my gosh, I'm about to miss my flight line. So keep your eyes open for that.
Especially with EES. We've talked about this so many times, and I know this is already going long. You're like, rapid fire. This is not rapid at all. But with EES, a lot of airports have committed to having people on staff that you can talk to if you are arriving and realizing, oh my gosh, my next flight leaves in even an hour. And you're like, this line is not going to take an hour. You can absolutely talk to these people. So In the previous episode, I believe last week's episode, we did mention as part of the headlines, EES, literally just after that episode was recorded by us, an article came out talking about how already a number of airports are talking about how this summer wave of tourism they're expecting is going to very much stress the ability of EES and potentially even make it something that has to pause, at least during the summer. So this could be something that's not an issue, but because right now it looks like they are trying to keep it functional and make it something you have to pass through, we do recommend not having an international connection. Instead, trying to figure out a way that your first landing in Europe is also in Italy if it's your first stop of your trip, if you're not doing a European tour.
And before we move on from flights, if you don't know what we're talking about when we are saying EES, that is the entry-exit system at all entry points in the EU, essentially. So what that is you're going to have to scan your, I think it's 4 fingers, right?
I believe so.
And then do a face scan. And that is taking a long time, that whole system. So be prepared for that. It is adding hours and hours onto people's exits from airports and transitions from one flight to another if you are going from, if you're landing in one European city and going on to another one. So that is what EES is.
Absolutely. That is very helpful.
So shall we move on to another section of tips?
Yes. So I think even though if you're actually 2 weeks out, you probably already have your accommodation. However, if you're not 2 weeks out and you're still putting together your trip for Italy, accommodation is a big one. We're going to talk about accommodation scams, I think, in a future episode, but we still wanted to sort of put some information out there just because there are some scams, and it seems like more than ever, not to be anti-AI, but it is making it so much easier to...
I am anti-AI, just to be clear.
Yes, no, I think I was like, oh, you should have made it very clear in that AI episode that we did, but we are both anti-AI, and it's just this, I didn't want it to be something that was like, oh, it's just because of AI. It's more just now.
Yeah.
It's super easy.
I think scams have increased exponentially because it is easier for scammers to do so now because of AI.
Yes. So on this note, booking scams can be a little bit difficult to kind of find, like to recognize immediately. Yes. I think before it was a little bit easier, and now it's a little harder because like, well, those are real photos, or those are, taken from somewhere. Those look like real places. Absolutely. At the very least. And like I said, we're going to go in the future, but essentially the 3 biggest one is AI photos are being used pretty frequently to like, oh, that looks like a gorgeous spot. Mm-hmm. One scam is simply that's just not how the hotel or Airbnb looks. The other scam is that is an entirely false creation in the sense that just does not exist, and those are fake photos. Nobody even had to Photoshop it because I think before all you could do is reverse image search a photo and be like, oh, that doesn't go to this hotel, that goes to that hotel, so this must be a fake one. And now that doesn't work.
Yeah.
However, what you can do is if you don't trust the photos, you can absolutely kind of look them up. Basically, there's a synth ID. A lot of AI photos should have basically a sort of hidden watermark that you can scan, and it will say, yes, this has been made with either Google or it's been OpenAI or whatever it is, and it is a generated photo. If it's a generated photo, there's a really good chance that the entire thing is fake. Sometimes we've seen, though, where they'll put people in a photo that aren't there necessarily, where it's like they'll have a photo of the lobby, for example, and they have another photo of the lobby with people in there. Right. And you're like, oh, okay. So clearly they just generated some people in there. So
yeah, it's almost like old school photo, not even old school, just photoshopping from a couple years ago when you could add people into the photo. Sometimes they will use AI for that.
Exactly. The next sort of big red flag is money transfer or bank transfer. This one's a weird one.
Before we move on, can I just say, sometimes I will check booking things. Like if I'm using a third-party site, I'll put in the name of the hotel and look up their website, or I'll put it into Google Maps and just see if the photos line up and see if I like that hotel. So that's an easy way to make sure that something's not AI or fake.
Yes, no, for sure. Actually, that does tie in maybe before the money transfer. That ties into the address. If you can independently verify the address of that hotel. And this is with anything, Expedia, Booking, Agoda, all these big set websites. It's very easy now to set up a fake place with fake reviews and then have them listed and then wait for people to book, collect their money, not refund them, and then close down and open up again. I know that Booking specifically has said on the matter that they don't really police what basically they don't police the hotels and Airbnb
Right.
or
They don't do their own sort of checking and controlling of that.
exactly. They're like, we're just a marketplace. You should check it yourself. This has led to, I think, for me and a lot of people, a kind of decline of the trustworthiness of a lot of these websites.
Absolutely.
Where you're like, I thought when I was booking through Expedia or Booking or whatever it is that like, yeah, I just assumed that these would be real places and not scams. I didn't assume, and I think Airbnb is kind of the same way. They're like, they all kind of say it's impossible for us to do so with how many new locations end up every day on our website. However, as you mentioned, you can double check with Google Maps. You can double check just on the internet. If you're like, this place does not appear anywhere else. There's no website. There's no Instagram. There's no other dedicated sort of page to this. It's probably likely a scam.
And it could just be a new business, but if you just want to be safe, be safe.
It can be a new business. And I think as two people who have frequently stayed at places that are new, I think like we're often the first customers because that's where you also get the deal. Like the hotel reopening is the one that offers the $100 a night instead of $400 a night kind of deal. But it's also like, you do take that risk of this might not be a real place.
That's the thing. It's risky.
Exactly. So the last one was money transfer, bank transfer. That is a scam. At least on Reddit, I'm seeing a lot more because in Europe we do use at least in Italy, it's called a bonifico. It's a money transfer, essentially.
It is
wire transfer.
Super common. People use it for all kinds of purchases.
And you, in fact, used it for a hotel with your workshop. It's just literally it's the equivalent of handing over cash. But in the States, it would be like a wire transfer. But you can't undo it.
Right.
There's no like, oh, I want my money back because that was a scam. So if you do see somebody saying, oh, we do a wire transfer here, that's just more normal. No.
Right. Insist on using a credit card.
Yeah, credit card, debit card even, which is still a little bit funky, but at least that goes through a payment processor that you can say, hey, come on, you're hooked up with a scam, essentially, and try to get money back. I think credit card's by far the safest. Or in some cases, again, I mentioned, even going through Booking, Expedia, Agoda, they have not been as forthcoming with places that are not real. And even, I know Booking specifically, and I think just because they're such a large company, once a year, every couple times a year, there is some article about how somebody stayed at a place that was not nearly as well what it was described as, advertised as. And then people feel like, oh, I've been sort of bait and switched. I'd like my money back. And Booking's often saying, hey, we can't do anything. You can talk to the people, but if they say no, then it's a no. And then it kind of puts a bad feeling in a lot of people's mouths because it sort of does make it seem like you should lie to people, and then when you get enough bad reviews, just close it down, open a new one, and do the same thing again. So it's all to say, we're going to go into this more in depth in a future episode, but we really wanted to put this in very briefly. Check for photos. If the photos are too good looking, if it's something, or they're a little uncanny or anything like that, they might not be real. So it might not be either one, that's not what the place actually looks like, or worse, there is no place at all. 2, double check and verify address, like of a physical address if you can through something like Google Maps, Apple Maps. And on the same level, try to verify to make sure there are other existing sort of Instagram pages, social media pages, something like that. And then 3, do not under any circumstances send a wire transfer or a bank transfer unless you just completely trust this hotel and you've stayed at them before and you recognize like the routing number or something like that. And you're like, oh, that's their IBAN. That's what they use, IBAN, the IBAN number is something they might say, you can send it to here. But typically don't send people a wire transfer.
Yes, I agree. And in terms of checking things through any sort of Maps app, that is a good thing to do in any case, even if you're not worried about a place using AI photos. It's just good to even look at the reviews there, to look at the street level view so that you can get a sense of what it looks like, where it is, the sort of general vibe of the area, and more photos potentially of the hotel.
Yes, 100%, 100%.
Something else to check for, which is really important, anytime, especially if you're staying in Italy or Europe in general, buildings here are old.
Yes.
So a lot of these places that are on the 3rd floor, or even if it's a hotel that is on multiple floors, they might not have an elevator. It is not a guaranteed standard here. And they might not have an elevator that is wide enough for a mobility device, even if they do have an elevator. So, number one, check the website or the booking site you're using to see if they have an elevator. If you are someone who needs a larger elevator, contact the hotel and ask them the size of it.
Likewise, make sure they have a way to get to the elevator, because sort of it's incomprehensible, but we've stayed in so many places that the elevator is up a flight of stairs.
Yep.
Like the bottom floor of the elevator is up 6 to 8 stairs.
Yes, that's a really good point.
And there's no ramp and there's nothing else in order to get up there. It's simply like just was not planned on.
Yep.
So that is someone might not think it through, and they might say, yeah, no, the elevator's huge, and not even think about the fact that you have to go up 7 or 8 stairs to just get to the elevator.
Yes.
Which happens very frequently.
Yes, absolutely. And also something to consider, which will not necessarily be listed on the site. This will be something you'll need to check through a Maps app like Google Maps. We're not supporting them or anything. It's just the easiest one to explain, So not all hotels are reachable by car, meaning they might be on a street, of course, but that street might be pedestrian only. It might not be accessible to cabs, or if you're renting a car, things like that. So check that on a Maps app.
And we've talked about that before in reference to a place like Positano, for example, or Capri, or one of these smaller seaside villages that you maybe don't expect a taxi to reach. But this also goes for places like Naples and Florence and Rome. There are a lot of ZTLs, limited traffic zones. There are a lot of pedestrian-only streets that have physical barricades to prevent cars from passing. So if you happen to be recently, we're dropping off your students, and it was the closest street a car could reach was still about 2 blocks away down a pedestrian street. So,
which is not necessarily bad if you enjoy just walking around, but it is very inconvenient if you have luggage, especially because not only is it far to carry and roll heavy luggage, these streets are not necessarily even. They are cobblestone, essentially. So it was difficult to reach.
It's very difficult, and it does sort of tie into our next point, which is to choose the right luggage or the right carry-on. We've talked about this a lot. Wheels are honestly so important.
They are your friend.
They are your friend. I know there is a romantic idea about the duffel bag. A backpack is also very, very helpful, I will say. It is. So I guess the duffel bag is just the worst option. Genuinely the worst option. Backpacks are okay. I highly recommend something with wheels, both for your airport and then also in situations like this where you're a few blocks away and you have a lot. Wheels can be helpful. You can just walk a couple feet and rest.
Yes.
On this note, the first, I guess my first piece of advice is highly specific, but it's to choose the right kind of carry-on, both for your needs, but then even beyond that, if you choose hard-sided, both the right kind of plastic. So typically just carry-on is usually hard or soft, hard being plastic, soft being a woven material, some sort of fabric. They tend to be a little heavier than the hard-sided ones, but they can be expandable. You can kind of shove things in there pretty easily because it does expand. It's also not waterproof. If this is not the biggest issue, honestly, but as we've mentioned in a previous episode, if you are planning on exploring Capri or taking the ferry from Positano somewhere and you have your luggage on board, there's a solid chance it's going to get wet.
Yes.
So,
and also it rains.
Oh, it rains.
And you might be walking through the rain, and even if you're covered by an umbrella, your luggage might be getting soaking wet, which is not great if you have soft-sided luggage.
Exactly. And it's as a lot of people have actually this weirdly, as you can imagine on anything with the internet, this is a conversation on the internet, where people are kind of back and forth, the people who love hard-sided and the people who love soft-sided. And one of the things that converts a lot of the soft-sided luggage lovers is the fact that you don't know how your luggage is going to be in the plane. And as other people have found, the amount of time somebody brings like a bottle of wine or alcohol or anything like liquid,
and it spills,
and it in their luggage it shatters, and so it drips onto everybody else's, and they're just like the third time you take your luggage, with wine all over it, and I've never had that issue. Genuinely, I don't think I've ever had a bag that got wet from something that is on the under of the bottom of the plane,
right?
But So I feel bad for the people who have had that multiple times, but they also, a lot of them make a good point of oftentimes, especially with a connection, if you're in a place that's raining, they do just leave the luggage outside.
Yes.
It's not like it goes under anywhere.
Oh my God.
So you are risking this. Again, this is like hard versus soft. There are a lot of benefits that are soft, but we tend to travel with hard-sided luggage, the plastic-sided luggage. If you can afford aluminum, like the Rimowa, that's a really popular brand because it's well, it looks really nice.
Yeah.
I think is mostly it. I don't know how much more protective it is, but
I will say too that neither of us are big proponents of buy all new things for your trip. We are very much reuse, reduce, recycle sort of people. But I will say that having known lots of people who have visited Italy in the past few years, lots of people have luggage back from like the 80s and 90s that they've pulled out of their closet.
100%.
And they tend to be so heavy, and you might not realize it when you leave, when you pack your bag and you leave home, but by the time you get here, you will start to notice how much heavier that stuff is compared to new hard-sided luggage. So consider that,
100%. I think also tying into that, most flights for the checked bag have a 50-pound weight limit. It's like 22
kilos.
22 point something kilos, 23 kilos, 22 kilos.
It's like 22.6 or something weird.
Maybe not. But there's a little, and they weigh it, and they're pretty good about it. I mean, I will say when you and I travel together and we have one checked bag, they let it be a little heavier because they're like, it's one bag for two people. It's fine if it's 60 pounds or something. But a heavy bag does make the difference. If it's already a 7 or 8 pound bag and that's empty, that does kind of prevent you from putting more stuff in it.
Yeah.
But also from walking around with it. If you choose hard-sided, my only note was to choose, if you can, if you're going to buy new, choose polycarbonate, the type of plastic. There is also ABS and there's polypropylene. Of the three, polycarbonate is the most flexible. ABS and polypropylene are both lighter, but they tend to shatter or break. If you ever see videos of like, I mean, it's a weird video for y'all to have seen, but there's often people losing their mind in like the checkout for like Ryanair or EasyJet. So they snap the wheels off their luggage to make it fit in that little thing or whatever it is. Those are typically propylene or polypropylene or ABS. It's a very light but very breakable plastic. It's also, if you ever received your bag from the sort of carousel and you're like, oh, it's shattered. That's typically the plastic. These are a little bit more low cost, but they're often even used in like, I hate to say fashion brands, but like you go to TJ Maxx, right? And then there's a lot of like these all look really nice. And then you're like, oh, they're all not really nice. It's still like expensive and not nice.
And speaking of which, because we have gone to places like TJ Maxx and Marshalls and things like that in the US to get luggage, usually on the tag, if you're shopping in person, it will say what kind of plastic or metal or whatever it's made out of. And if you're shopping online for it, it should have that listed there.
Exactly. And the only reason I recommend the polycarbonate is it is flexible instead of, it's a little heavier, but more flexible in the sense that you could probably even stand on it without it breaking, but you can't like snap the wheels off. But it's also a good thing because we've had one polycarbonate bag now for I think 3 or 4 years and it has lasted for so many flights versus before it would be, I think every 2 flights we'd have to replace a bag because it would just, the wheel, like where the wheel meets the body shatters or some sort of crack down the middle of it. And it's that sort of small thing of you're spending a fair amount more, almost double for a bag for like in the short term, but then it actually ends up lasting because, and the reason I bring up this whole point is the worst thing in the world genuinely is going on a trip, arriving and realizing your bag is just shattered and then having to,
or even
first
that
thing
your
having to get
wheel
a
is
new one.
broken.
Or that a wheel is broken. Exactly. And as you go back to this, the idea about the hotel or wherever you're staying, if it's down a street, you have to roll it, you're out of luck. For me, this does bring me very easily to the next point in still related. It's to, if you can, pack your bag in such a way that you can still carry it. If that makes sense. Because you never know when you're going to hit stairs. You never know where you're going to have to hit something. We have to go up, over. And if you cannot physically carry it, it might be more difficult for you depending on where you end up. Again, you mentioned before, it is not a guarantee to have a elevator at your hotel or at your short-term rental, anything like that. There's also not a guarantee that somebody will be there to help you. I mean, I think one of the biggest issues for a lot of people with the short-term rentals is I left the key under the potted plant. you can just grab it, or I left it in the key box, or I left it here. You can go grab it and you can let yourself in. There's no one then to help you up the stairs with your luggage. So I think that's something that, I know we've mentioned this before, years ago when your mom came to visit, she had thought, just like in America, of course, there's an elevator.
Right.
It's like, so she
Of
didn't
course.
really think that there wouldn't be. And you and I didn't really think to tell her, because it was like, again, that had become so common to us that we forgot that it was not standard.
Right.
So it was kind of that fun little disconnect of, oh, we forgot to tell you. Of course you didn't know. And yeah, we have a bunch of bags.
Yeah,
And it was
now
ended
we're
up
here.
And now we're here. And it ended up being easy. We were able to get the bags up the stairs, but
But it was also easy because we had you.
well, I'm not
You
that strong, but I
But
appreciate
you're
that.
also tall and you are kind and you will struggle through. So between me
There's a
and
lot
you,
of complaining. I want to be very clear. This is not like,
it was
complaintless.
quiet struggle.
yeah, it was not a quiet struggle. There was groaning.
But
And
between the three of us,
huffing.
we were able to manage. I think sometimes we even had to take 2 trips. But it was hard because all of our luggage was relatively heavy, and sometimes it was 4 flights of stairs.
And this is especially important when you are like, and we'll get into kind of souvenirs in the next episode, but when you're thinking about souvenirs, especially because I think a lot of people do pack with empty space in order to bring things back.
Of course.
Considering the fact that, for those of you who just care, a liter of water is the same as a kilo of water, if you will. And I mention that because if you're bringing like a bottle of wine back, or if you're bringing olive oil back, or if you're bringing anything liquid like that, a kilo being 2.2 pounds for our American listeners, you can assume a bottle of wine is about 2.2 pounds. So if you're bringing a couple bottles of wine back, just assume that's 2, 4, 6 extra pounds.
That's such a good tip.
And just like things add up quickly. So if you're like, I'm going to bring some bottles of wine, a bottle of olive oil, and maybe some cheese back, it might be that you're coming back with an extra 15 pounds without realizing just how heavy it is. Oil obviously being heavier than like a liquid like water, but it's still, this is just to keep in mind that it can very quickly get heavy. So make sure that you can carry it, just so you can avoid anything where basically you're stuck down a street and realizing there's nobody around to help.
Yes, really good tip.
So the last 2 tips about luggage. One is, if you basically leaving it at a hotel, or not always can you leave it at a short-term vacation rental.
Right. Meaning, like, if you have a period of time before check-in or after check-out and you still want to wander around, you might need to leave your luggage somewhere.
Exactly. So if you're at a hotel, this is usually very easy. You can leave it with the hotel. Even if you haven't checked in, that is very commonplace for you to show up early, leave your hotel, and go wander for a bit before checking in.
Absolutely.
Just on that note, very, very quickly, in general, at hotels in Italy, check-in is usually 3 p.m. Check-out is typically 10, sometimes 11, but just for your own planning purposes, in terms of travel time, if you're leaving Rome and going to Florence, just assume you're checking out by 10, you're checking in by 3. That is, again, it wiggles a bit. It used to be check-in at 1 p.m., check-out at 11. It used to be a little bit tighter window. But in the last couple of years, every time we've stayed somewhere, it's pretty consistently 3 p.m.
And we have had good luck of politely asking if it might be possible to check in earlier, or just be flexible and see on the day of if you're allowed to check in earlier. Places often will have that sort of flexibility. Obviously, it requires you being flexible as well and extremely polite so that you're in their good graces, but don't plan on being able to check in early.
Exactly.
But you should be able to leave your luggage. Again, you will need to communicate that, talk to the people at the front desk ahead of time and ask if you'll be able to leave your luggage with them.
And the reason we recommend this is just because it makes exploring a place a lot easier, especially if you're leaving. So you're not worrying about like jet lag and things like that. But if you're going from Rome to Florence and you're like, I have 3 or 4 hours, what am I going to walk around with a bag for? We highly recommend leaving it. If you can't leave it at a hotel or short-term vacation rental, we do recommend just finding one of the luggage deposits. They are various different ones. And I just mentioned, part of this piece of advice, this tip, is sometimes it's just a guy in a room. And
Most of the time, it's just a guy in a room, or it's the back room of a cafe.
Or it's the back room of a cafe. It's not, and I mention this too because it can look like, oh, this is a scam. It's not. It's just, I know there's different apps. Bounce is one app that we've used in the past with some fair bit of luck.
Yeah.
Where it's a little bit more expensive. I think it's $5 a bag, but like everything counts as a bag. So if like backpack and roller bags, so it's like $20 all of a sudden.
Whereas in Naples, there are a couple different luggage sort of deposits. But last time we left, I think a couple backpacks to walk around for an hour. No, a couple backpacks and a
roller
large
bag. Yeah.
roller bag. And they were nice enough to say like, yeah, we got the space. It's fine. We'll combine two. And that only costs, one bag price. And
that was ended up being €3
yeah,
an hour.
€3 a bag. And we paid that in person. That was really, really great.
So they all are various and different, but it's just something that it can be a small cost, and then what you get out of it is sort of peace of mind, not having to walk around with your bag, and
so convenient.
A little bit more relaxed feeling. I mean, again, there's always the, oh my God, what if they go through my bag? We've never had that happen. I don't know if anybody has ever. I mean, that's certainly happened before, no doubt, but like that is not what people complain about, I will say, on the internet when it comes to leaving your luggage. That is not a top complaint. That is I can't believe that's happened to you. That's insane that somebody would go through your bag.
One note, I don't know if this is important, but they tend to not necessarily be temperature controlled environments. I don't know if that is important to you, but that is just a thought.
And the last note on luggage is to pack some essentials in your carry-on. Essentials being underwear, shorts, shirts, pants, dresses.
Like one small outfit.
At least one small outfit. Potentially two, because there is obviously and always there's a small chance that your luggage will not make it to your destination within the time frame that you made it to your destination.
Exactly.
And it can be that little awkward period of like, oh, I have no clothes. This is fun. So,
and walking around, if you have to wear your plain clothes multiple days in a row, nightmare.
Well, and that's what I'm thinking. If it's two changes of clothes, because you're somebody who likes to land, shower, and then have a fresh change of clothes that you were not wearing for the last 24 hours.
Absolutely.
So two changes of clothes.
Smart.
And then like, again, any other necessities should be in your carry-on. Obviously laptops, things like that, because you really don't want those going missing for a few days if you travel with laptops or iPads, something like that. Chargers should be in your carry-on. Anything that you're like, without this, I'm going to have a very bad time.
Yes.
Should be in your carry-on, unless it's something that cannot legally be in your carry-on, which I'm not sure what that's like. I think certain things that you can't have like on the plane with you, we can put underneath.
Okay.
Like in the States, it'd be a gun, so that doesn't really help. And
doesn't seem that essential.
Does not seem that essential on your Italy trip, but that's like where my brain was like, yeah, like guns in case you need to travel.
I'm thinking.
Wow, that's
Wild.
not great. Yeah.
Wow, you're so American. So no, so I would say chargers, electronics, things like that, and medications. Obviously, anything that you need.
That was a much better example. If it's a liquid medication and you can't travel that with your carry-on, you have to put it in your checked bag. There we go. Let's pretend I said that the first time around.
So any essentials like that, I do highly recommend you put in your carry-on bag. And like Nathaniel said, 2 changes of clean clothes.
Yes. So that has been somewhat rapid tips. Friday, we will continue even quicker because we have more to go through, but they are shorter. This was just bigger and more, they were just larger topics, I guess. Yeah. The flight, the accommodations, and the accommodations, luggage. So that all being said, we really hope that this was at least helpful and it wasn't too quick and muddled and I was not talking for too much.
And if you have any questions, please feel free to join the chat on Patreon with any questions about this episode, other things. You can also contact us on onlyabag.com if you are perhaps panicking because you don't have the right kind of luggage according to this episode, or have further questions, anything like that. We are around to help.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for listening. Tanti abbracci.